Right, before we take a short interval, we've got a nice special treat for you all. She has her own night on the first Tuesday of every month called Jilliana's Spoken Word Salon. She has a fascinating life, which you can read about on her website, and she also presents and produces a radio show called Your Voice Matters on Brighton and Hove Community Radio, which I'm going to be a guest on Friday the 10th of May. God help me. Please give it up for the fantastic, the one and only Jilliana.
Thank you, Aiden. I don't like microphones, so I hope you can all hear me.
Yes. Yep.
Good evening, all. I used to live in Paris, and all my stories, by the way, are true. They may not appear to be true, but believe you me, they are. And this one is called Tutus in Paris. I came to live in Paris without social connections when I was about 30 in 1977. Don't try and work out how old I am. After having lived 6 months in Mexico, I quickly realised that walking into an art gallery opening, that's vernissage in French, I quickly realised that walking into an art gallery in Saint-Germain, the art district on the left bank, around 7 o'clock was the best place to meet interesting people. One Wednesday evening, I picked a known Russian artist's vernissage, dressed up, and off I strode, a little nervous, as I knew almost no one in Paris, the City of Lights. I knew very little about the Parisian art world, but loved the Impressionists and the Fauves. Mihail Shemiakin was a professional artist and de rigueur. The gallery was packed with branché guests, so one could hardly view his paintings displayed on the wall. It was a place just to be seen and not heard. Tired and alone in a crowd of posh people, I sat on a sofa next to a distinguished, much older gentleman who was looking bored and detached. "Quelle est votre opinion de les peintures?" I asked innocently. "Well, what do you think of the paintings?" He glanced at me sideways, uninterested, until he heard my obvious English accent. Speaking fluent English, he suddenly perked up, explaining he had lived many years in London in the 50s as Baron's photographic assistant. Baron, who died in 1965, had been the famous London Society's photographer. He rose and took me, young ghost Jilliana, in hand, introducing me to his Russian friend, the artist that tout Paris was talking about. He proudly introduced himself as Jilliana from Moscow, a Russian émigré. Never had I met one before, or, for that matter, since. I confided in Jilliana I'd just arrived in Paris and was living in the Rue Campagne Première, Montparnasse. I was thus informed that not only had scenes from the film Au bout du souffle been shot in that street, but also Modigliani had committed suicide by throwing himself out of his studio window. Jilliana, of course, was knowledgeable in the arts. Being my protector for the evening, and as it was early, Jilliana suggested, after a surprise dinner, we should pay a visit to his old friend, the German fashion photographer Willy Mewald, at his studio in the Rue Grande de la Chaumière, who hosted salons on Wednesdays and Saturday evenings. He went to make a phone call to ask if the salon was on, asking the person who answered the phone if it was on. "Mais oui," was the reply. So off we went into the night, taking a taxi and chatting about art and photography, which I knew in those days absolutely nothing about. I had come to Paris to be educated, and educated I was over the coming years. We arrived at Willie's studio, hidden at the end of a secret garden, tucked away in a street famous for its art school, around the corner from the Metro Vavin and Le Select Brasserie, which was to become my second home on the Boulevard Montparnasse. Jilliana unlocked the door and we entered another private world. There was elderly, distinguished Willie on the couch in an original artist's atelier with a high glass roof. His black and white portraits of famous artists such as Chagall, Picasso and Braque adorned the walls. Willie, in his element, was surrounded by Spanish transvestites wearing shocking pink tutus. Well, not all of them. Some had long evening dresses in garish colours, others dressed in bling and little else, wearing wigs and very heavy makeup. Some even had fresh flowers in their hair. Everyone was laughing and speaking Spanish so loudly that I joined in. Hola, ¿qué tal? The outrageous, fun-loving party guests were all shapes and sizes and looking fabulous. Jilliana and I realised we had gate-crashed a private birthday party for a cabaret singer named Carla, who was swanning around and hitting the high notes. Willie rose to greet me in English with a heavy, guttural German accent. Jilliana, I can't do a German accent. Jilliana, you've come on the wrong night. Bring Jilliana on a Saturday night. I think she would prefer that. He nodded and smiled at me knowingly. A charming man who was later to be rediscovered by Jutta Neyman at the end of his long life as a recognized black and white portrait and fashion photographer. Jilliana suggested we leave as he'd just been propositioned by one of the guests on his way to the bathroom. He assured me women were his preference. We left, and he accompanied me to my nearby abode at 27 Rue Campagne Première, close by in Montparnasse. However, he hovered at the heavy wooden front door, waiting to be invited in for who knows what, saying he was lonely and looking for a relationship. I thanked him for the evening and we agreed to meet on a Saturday for the salon, but made certain he understood there'd be no relationship. Willie Mayvald, the fashion photographer of Dior's new look, was the catalyst for my new life in Paris, although he never knew how his Saturday salons would educate me, giving me the self-confidence I lacked and leading me to find my new identity.
Fantastic, thank you very much, Jilliana. And there's plenty more of Jilliana's vignettes on her website, and there's some very good reading on there, trust me. Fabulous. So we're going to take a bit of an interval. So.